What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA playoffs. Sunday, June 27th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have an NBA showdown between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Hawks. So let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Drew Holiday from the Milwaukee Bucks playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense, and they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Drew Holiday has averaged 36.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 38, 59, and 32 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 41, and 48 minutes. He's projected at 40.6 fantasy points here tonight. Probably one of my favorite plays on the slate, so I like Drew Holiday here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Another point guard that I like, here's a stud pick for you. I like Trae Young from the Atlanta Hawks, and Trae Young has averaged 43.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 33% usage rate. He scored 19, 70, and 34 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 41, and 43 minutes. So he's playing monster minutes, and he had a letdown game yesterday. It's not a surprise after putting up 70 fantasy points. Players tend to have letdown games the game after putting up such big numbers. So I do expect him to bounce back in a big way, and he's projected at 46.3 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Trae Young here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. Now, this guy hasn't really done well lately. He's been injured, and his minutes are a little bit questionable, but his salary's low enough that I think he makes an interesting tournament play. So if you do want to make your lineup different, take a look at Bogdan Bogdanovic from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Milwaukee Bucks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Bogdan Bogdanovic, he averaged 28.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He scored 17, 18, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 18, 27, and 21 minutes. So that game was a blowout last game. So these Atlanta Hawk players didn't play a ton of minutes, only played 18 minutes, but I don't think that was because of injury. And he did score 17 fantasy points in 18 minutes, which is pretty good. So if he can get 27 to 30 minutes, he could score close to 30 fantasy points, and I think he could be a big surprise to a lot of people. He's projected at 22 fantasy points here tonight, but if you want a high-risk, high-reward tournament play, take a look at Bogdan Bogdanovic here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, super low salary player here. If you want to open up your salary for those studs, take a look at Pat Connaughton from the Milwaukee Bucks. He averaged 17 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 12% usage rate. He scored 14, 10, and 14 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 13, 28, and 23 minutes. So he hasn't done much lately, but if he can play 25 to 30 minutes or 25 to 28 minutes, and if he gets hot, he could crush value here because his salary is so low. He's projected at 17.2 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Pat Connaughton as a tournament play only here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Chris Middleton From the Milwaukee Bucks, Chris Middleton has averaged 36.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 36, 32, and 56 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 40, and 52 minutes. Now, Chris Middleton scored 36 fantasy points in only 28 minutes last game, and I think this might be my favorite play on the slate, along with Drew Holiday. I think getting both of these guys in a lineup is going to do pretty well here tonight. He's projected at 41.1 fantasy points here tonight, so I like Chris Middleton here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, now if you're looking to save some salary, this is a high-risk, high-reward play, but he's playing a bunch of minutes, so you got to consider him. Take a look at Kevin Huerter from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Milwaukee Bucks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Kevin Huerter has averaged 24.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 12, 17, and 42 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 36, and 39 minutes. He's projected at 26.1 fantasy points here tonight. He's a hit or miss type of player, boom or bust. He's either going to make or break your lineup. So if you want a tournament play, make your lineup different, take a look at Kevin Huerter here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. And I just want to give an honorable mention to Danilo Gallinari. Now, he really hasn't played well at all the past couple of games. He scored 13, 9, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 15, 25, and 30 minutes. So he only played 15 minutes last game, so you can throw that score out. If he can get 25 to 30 minutes, this guy could be a big surprise here tonight. He's got a good matchup. He's projected at 22.2 fantasy points here tonight. So I just have a feeling that a big game is coming for Danilo Gallinari. So I'm going to take a shot on him in one of my lineups. So I like Danilo Gallinari as a tournament play here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. We got a stud here, Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Milwaukee Bucks. He's averaging 53.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 33% usage rate. He scored 50, 71, and 63 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 41, and 50 minutes. He's been crushing the Atlanta Hawks, only played 29 minutes last game, but still scored 50 fantasy points, so he's projected at 59.7 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Giannis Antetokounmpo here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, another power forward that I like is John Collins. From the Atlanta Hawks, he averaged 31.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 20, 41, and 39 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 24, 36, and 41 minutes. He's projected at 34.1 fantasy points here tonight, so I like John Collins here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, now if you're looking to save some salary, there's a couple power forwards here that you can plug into your lineup. The first one is Bobby Portis from the Milwaukee Bucks. He averaged 24.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 21 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He scored 18 and 21 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 17 and 14 minutes. So if he can get close to 20 minutes here, I think he could crush value. He's projected at 21.3 fantasy points here tonight. His salary's low, so I like Bobby Portis here versus the Atlanta Hawks. And the other guy that's playing a ton of minutes in his low salary is PJ Tucker from the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, he's only averaged 12.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 7% usage rate, but he scored 23, 15, and 32 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 26, 34, and 38 minutes. So he normally plays over 30 minutes, so he's got plenty of opportunity to rack up those fantasy points. He's projected at 22 fantasy points here tonight, so I like PJ Tucker here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Clint Capella from the Atlanta Hawks. He averaged 40 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He scored 10, 44, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 24, 37, and 32 minutes. So you can pretty much throw out the last game scores for all these Atlanta Hawks. They all played low minutes. They all pretty much sucked. Clint Capella, he finally broke out with a 44 fantasy point game in 37 minutes. So he's got that big upside. His salary is really low. So he's projected at 35 fantasy points here tonight. Now, he hasn't played that well through the playoffs, but I still have faith that he's going to return, regress to the mean, regress to his average of 40 fantasy points and score 35 to 38 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Clint Capella here versus the Milwaukee Bucks.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.